Hello, and welcome to my first ever game review. I stream a lot of games over on Twitch, channel linked in the description below, and usually wind up with some pretty strong opinions on the games that I play. I hate it here! So why not share those unsolicited opinions with the world? Today, we're going to be talking about Shadow of the Colossus, specifically the 2018 remake, since that's the version I played. And for those of you who adore this game, which seems to be the vast majority of people, I am going to give you a proper warning now. My review is not going to be the most favorable review out there. Please save the crucifixion until the end of the video. Let's get into it. Shadow of the Colossus was originally released in 2005 for the PlayStation 2. The game was recommended to me by quite a few people who had nothing but positive things to say about this game. A quick Google search shows it is rated incredibly high, pulling near perfect scores, and it is now considered a cult classic. Many people have said it is their favorite and or just plain old the best game of all time. I was told that there was no other game to compare it to. Nothing like it had ever been done before, and nothing like it has been done since. Having now finished the game, I would have to agree that I don't really know what games I could compare it to. I can absolutely see how it may have acted as inspiration for future games. An example being the sheer size of some of the enemies faced in Souls-likes, the bleakness of the world, the guilt that you feel as you stab at bosses thinking, should I be doing this? But comparing it to Dark Souls as a whole would be wildly misleading. The vast majority of the Shadow of the Colossus gameplay consists of fighting massive stone-like colossi, but not in the way that you would fight a creature like in Dark Souls. They're essentially giant puzzles. You are faced by a massive colossus and first have to figure out how to get on this absolute behemoth, puzzle out how to reach its weak points, and stab at those weak points to take it down. You have a sword, a bow, and that's it. There are no weapon upgrades throughout the game, there are no secret strats, there is no farming of levels, do not pass go, do not collect $200. You're a boy with a stick fighting an ancient giant. Good luck. This is the quickest description of the game I feel like I can give without getting into spoilers. So if you're hoping to avoid those and just want my final score for Shadow of the Colossus, you might want to skip to the summary at the end of this video for my final rating. I'll give you 3, 2, 1. Okay. First, I want to tackle the pros, because while I may not have been the biggest fan of this game, it still deserves some praise. We'll start with the obvious. This game is gorgeous. It has a beautiful art style and this stunningly beautiful world that might have been enjoyable to just ride around in, but we'll talk more about that later. The game begins with an absolutely gorgeous cutscene and this beautiful swelling soundtrack. The soundtrack is something that remains consistently golden throughout the game. I mean, it is top tier. It makes the fights feel even more intense and makes it feel like a really epic battle. My favorite track is probably Revived Battle. Seriously, go give it a listen. It's so good. So yeah, the start of this game gave me an immediate sense of wonder about this world and how we fit in it. Where are we going? Why was this girl sacrificed? Who is she to us? And why are we willing to go to such great lengths to save her? I was intrigued right out of the gate and was really excited to play the game. A+ for the approach to the Forbidden Lands and hooking me in, A+ for beautifully remastered graphics, and for all the forms of art in this game as a whole. Well done. Once you gain control of your character and after a brief janky jaunt and some failed parkour, it's time. Your first Colossus. A massive hoof crashes down in front of you, and that's when it really hits you. I'm supposed to kill this thing? That initial sense of awe and wonderment is something very few video games manage to pull off. This reveal remains one of my favorite parts of the game. Not just for the first Colossus, but for all of them. When you finally find a Colossus arena, you get a brief cutscene revealing, thy next foe. It is beyond cool to see how these monsters are designed. To see how they move, and to already quickly be taking stock of the arena and how you might manage to climb and conquer this thing. This is where the game really shines. It showcases some incredibly unique concepts and designs, and this aspect of the game is something I'd love to see done again. Next up, this game really plays into your emotions in ways that I didn't fully expect. The Colossi reveals themselves are emotionally striking. You see these gigantic beasts and your gamer brain is thinking, okay, how do we kill it? But if you're like me and suspected we were somewhat of a villain from the start, you also feel horrifically bad and evil upon seeing the next creature you're supposed to take down. This giant Colossus has been wandering around for who knows how long, minding its own business, eating grass and rocks or whatever, and here we are, wandering into its home to smack it in the face with some tiny sticks. We are listening to an ominous, disembodied voice which is telling us to kill 16 presumably innocent creatures to save one girl. How could we not be the villain in this scenario? Knowing you have no choice but to kill this magnificent beast is really sad. And that's the whole point of the game. Facing the consequences of your actions, whether they were intended or not, and being powerless against your fate. I think Shadow of the Colossus has become a favorite for so many people, specifically due to the message and feeling of this game. I can appreciate how striking this game may have been for some, especially at the time of its initial release. You spend the game feeling bad. You know you're in a forbidden land, committing irredeemable crimes against the almost sole inhabitants of this place, the Colossi. I definitely spent the game assuming their innocence, and I'm sure many of you did too, even if we were a little off the mark. So you wander this beautiful, empty world just to murder the few inhabitants you find, for the sake of one person. You've absolutely failed the trolley problem. It feels bad, I felt bad, and I found it hard to keep going when I knew what we were doing was wrong. The poignancy of this game is something that I can appreciate. The ending, while somewhat confusing, is open to your interpretation, and I've seen some pretty cool theories. I'll let you guys puzzle that one out for yourself. I have seen people say, this isn't a game, this is art. I somewhat agree. And while I've always seen that comment written as a positive review of the game, it's actually a quote that I'm going to use to lead us into the cons of Shadow of the Colossus. This isn't a game, this is art. Now don't get me wrong, video games can absolutely be used as a medium for artistic expression. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a video game. I play video games because I find them fun, and it's my opinion that the gameplay should always come first. It doesn't matter how gorgeous a game is if it doesn't play well. It doesn't matter how powerful the story is if I'm frustrated just picking up the controller. And my god, the frustration I felt playing this game was immeasurable. Let's start with Agro. Poor, dear, sweet Agro, I don't blame you for your heinous controls, but my god. Now let me preface this with the fact that after having completed the game, I've done some Googling and guides do exist out there about how to better control her, such as holding the triangle button to keep her at a maximum gallop. I had no idea that this was an option for my entire playthrough, and this made navigating to Colossi, aka exploring the world, my absolute least favorite part of this game. I couldn't enjoy the beauty of the graphics or world around me because I was busy mashing triangle and screaming at Agro in frustration. This also made me despise any Colossi fights that required Agro. You're going to force me to use this janky horse who doesn't have the sense of self-preservation to run from the giant sand snake and instead slows to a leisurely trot while I'm trying to look back and shoot a moving eyeball. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but a few people told me that Agro was intentionally designed to be, quote, disobedient. This was to make it feel more like controlling a real horse and help with the player's immersion. Look, I can appreciate the dedication to immersion, and I can respect those of you with the opinion that this is a neat feature to include in the game. But for me, once again, gameplay should always come first. Gameplay should not be sacrificed for the sake of realism. Ever. Sure, it's neat, but after having spent hours wrestling with the controls to get to each of the Colossi, that realism got old real quick. Maybe I'm being unfair by including this as such a negative, especially after reading the fan-written guides, but I'm still very sore about this from my playthrough. Maybe I just had distracted streamer brain and the game did tell us to hold triangle to maintain the top speed. If so, that's on me, not you. Sorry, game. But I'm still leaving this as a massive con, and the worst horse controls I've ever had the displeasure of experiencing in a video game. Roach, you're no longer worst girl. Congratulations. This leads me into the emptiness of the world as a whole. I'm a completionist at heart. I usually love exploring, especially if there's some kind of reward for doing so. People boast of how beautiful the world is, which is true, and I'm sure that wandering around and exploring was one of the best parts of the game for some of you. But to me, there was nothing about this world that made me want to explore it. Sure, the graphics are pretty, but you've seen one pretty blade of grass, you've seen them all. I'm not exactly unlocking any neat new features by exploring. It doesn't help me upgrade anything. I'm not saving any cute grubs or rot and feeling a sense of accomplishment for doing so. I understand that the world is meant to be bleak and empty to leave you with that sense of foreboding and of trespassing on a dead and forbidden land. But again, you've now sacrificed any drive to explore for the sake of setting a mood. Say it with me, gameplay should always come first. Other games, like Hollow Knight, make me feel the sadness of a lost society while also still making me want to explore it. You can have both. The pretty graphics were not enough to make me want to explore, especially when combined with the pain of controlling Agro. After finding a Colossi or two, I was ready to fast travel to the rest of them and just be done with it. I'm just grateful that finishing a Colossus teleported us back to the shrine to save us another agonizing trip. Next up, the Colossus fights themselves. Now, remember how I said the Colossus reveals were my favorite part of the game? That is still absolutely true, but I can't say that I was head over heels for the fights themselves. I still enjoyed puzzling out some of the Colossi, but I'm gonna be honest, it lost its luster pretty fast for me. After the first Colossus or two, I remember thinking, is this it? Running to a Colossus, clambering on top of it, and then clinging on for dear life while occasionally stabbing it with my little toothpick? That's it? And that turned out to be true. That really is the whole game. Like I said, I did enjoy puzzling out some of the Colossi, but even when you had figured out the puzzle, you sometimes had to go through a lot of tedium to then take them down. There are a few Colossi where you need to wait for them to do a specific action or get to a specific position, and having to wait for these slow, lumbering beasts to do what you want had me bored. Don't get me wrong, there wasn't a lack of variety in the design of the Colossi themselves, but there was a distinct lack of variety in the gameplay. Get in position, hold R2, and when the thing finally stops shaking for 2 seconds, hopefully get a stab or two in before you inevitably run out of stamina, or I suppose grip strength, tumble back down to the ground, and have to repeat the entire process over again. In my head, the fight was already over. I knew how to win, and so I had won. It was just a matter of time and repetition, not skill. Not only that, but having to continuously hold down R2 actually started to hurt, particularly on the final Colossus. I had to climb back up that stupid thing countless times, as the janky jumping mechanics had me constantly falling off. To be fair, I did break my right pointer finger when I was younger, and that might have something to do with it, but my finger was hurting after having to hold down R2 for so long. This might not have been a problem for others, but I had to take breaks for my poor little finger. It sucked. This whole process was tedious. Not fun, not exciting, and certainly not something I ever want to repeat. So, with all of that being said, where do I stand on the game as a whole? Just because I didn't enjoy a game personally, that doesn't necessarily make the game bad. It just means it wasn't my cup of tea. If I were speaking candidly to a friend about my own personal enjoyment of the game, I would probably give it a 4 out of 10. Bad. It's beautiful with a good story at the end of the game, and clearly I managed to finish it, but the gameplay weighed down my opinions so heavily that I would not recommend that a friend purchase the game. Maybe just watch a playthrough of it instead. If I try to remove my own bias and distance myself from the pain fresh off my first playthrough, I'll give Shadow of the Colossus a 6 out of 10. Okay. I will stand by the fact that I think this game is heavily overrated. Perhaps my opinion wouldn't be so soured if I didn't go into this with such high expectations. I can appreciate the art of the game itself, but I still don't think it warrants the praise of the best game of all time. And I certainly can't understand how it's such a fan favorite. But hey, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. If Shadow of the Colossus is a game that you love, or a game that you're looking forward to playing, don't let my opinion stop you. Give it a try, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. And that's it! My first ever game review. If you liked the video, even if you didn't necessarily agree with my opinions, please make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.